Really, it's going to be something until you go back and look at it. It's really tough to say, but I know this. When I'm looking at it in terms of some of the intent, what we were trying to get done on a lot of things, I know this. I know I did not put our guys in good spots, and that's something that I have to be better for within the framework of my role and what I can control.
That was a lie. It was a necessary lie, and a lie that all great head coaches say after every single loss, but it was a lie nonetheless. Sean McVay can take all the credit he wants to for a truly disastrous offensive performance by his team, but if there is one thing in this world that does not lie, it's tape. And the tape from last Sunday's loss against Chicago says two things very loudly and very clearly. One, McVay actually did call a pretty decent game. And two, Jared Goff had such an uncharacteristically terrible night that no amount of great play calls would have salvaged his performance anyway. There was quite literally nothing that McVay could have done. And yes, as I say that, I can already hear all of you Todd Gurley fantasy owners groaning in the back that he only got 11 carries. I get it, he's your franchise running back, he's your best weapon, he should get more than 11 carries in a semi-close game. And under normal circumstances, I would agree. But as McVay put it in his post-game press conference, these were not exactly normal circumstances.
Yeah, they were playing a lot of base defense to 11, and then they got into some structures where they were basically playing 6 guys at the line of scrimmage. We felt like we had to be able to, the best way to be able to move the football was going to be throwing it.
Let's break that first statement down really quick, because I actually noticed this too as I charted the Rams offense in real time this week, and it perfectly explains both why Todd Gurley had so few carries and why Jared Goff had so many passes. When McVay says that the Bears were playing a lot of base defense to 11, what he means is that the Bears were lining up with their base personnel, which consists of 3 defensive linemen, 4 linebackers, and 4 defensive backs, against the Rams, who were running their most used personnel grouping, which is 11 personnel. 1 running back, 1 tight end, that's where the number 11 comes from, and 3 wide receivers. Now, most of the time, if an offense is in 11 personnel and has 3 wide receivers on the field, the defense will match them with a nickel defense that swaps out either a linebacker or a defensive lineman for an extra defensive back, usually a third cornerback to match up with that third wide receiver. But the Bears did not do that for large portions of this game. They left their base defense on the field with only 2 cornerbacks against 3 receivers and stacked the box with 7 defensive linemen and linebackers on a lot of snaps against 11 personnel. 18 snaps to be exact. That's not only extremely ballsy, but extremely rare to take that kind of gamble that often. If you include an additional 4 snaps where they played a 3-3-5 jumbo nickel look with 3 big space-eating defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs, they essentially had run-stopping personnel in on defense against passing personnel on offense on 22 snaps. Again, that is extremely rare for a defensive coordinator to take that kind of chance against any passing offense, let alone a historically good one like the Rams. LA tried to test those heavy fronts with 4 different runs out of 11 personnel and averaged negative yardage on those 4 carries. When Sean McVay says that the looks were not there and they were forced to pass on a lot of possessions where they planned on running early in the game, trust me, that part of the press conference was true. The looks just were not there, and Vic Fangio was not going to allow them to be there. In fact, the Bears' entire defensive game plan can be summed up in 4 easy bullet points that illustrate their whole mentality. 1. Take Todd Gurley out of the game with personnel groupings and constantly bringing blitzes to attack the run on the way to the quarterback. 2. Use those same blitzes to make Jared Goff uncomfortable on longer developing play-action passes and force the ball to go to his checkdowns. 3. Play coverages that excel against deep balls off of play action, like cover 4, to further encourage those checkdowns. And 4. After accounting for the pressure and the deep ball coverage, force the Rams to dink and dunk their way down the field and frustrate them into eventually making a mistake. It was a brilliant game plan that attacked everything that Sean McVay's offense does well, namely running the ball and taking deep shots off of play action, but credit to McVay, he did adjust rather quickly and did call plays that always had a shorter option available for Goff to get himself out of trouble. If the downfield passing game was not there, Goff almost always had an outlet that he could rely on just to get something positive out of every single snap. It was playing into the structure of Fangio's game plan, sure, but it was really the only option that McVay had, so he was willing to roll with it. However, where the Rams went wrong, and where Vic Fangio went very, very right, was that McVay did not anticipate his young star quarterback factoring against him in that dink and dunk offense. And by that, I mean sometimes young quarterbacks that have passed with impunity all season long don't like to be chained up and forced to take checkdowns. Sometimes they don't want to nibble their way through a meal, and sometimes they just want to eat the whole damn thing in one bite, whether that's a good idea or not. That frustrated effort to try to make a big play downfield all the time is what Fangio and the Bears were counting on, and Goff played right into their hands from the beginning. They weren't waiting for McVay to make a mistake, they knew that he's too smart for that. They were waiting for Goff to get annoyed and to make a throw that he really should not have made, and boy did he ever come through with a lot of those. Almost all of the Rams' problems in the passing game last Sunday night can be boiled down to Goff trying to eat the whole meal in one bite and then paying for it dearly. And that first interception of the game to Roquan Smith is a perfect example of that. It's 1st and 20 in a tie ball game early in the second quarter, and McVay dials up a double seam concept, which is a pretty good call against one of the Bears' most common coverages that they use quite a lot, cover 3 robber. That's where they roll Adrian Amos to the deep middle and slide Eddie Jackson down to the intermediate middle to take away anything like a post route or a dig route in that area of the field. It's one of the staple coverages that Fangio calls, and the double seam concept is able to exploit it a little bit if you can catch Jackson in a bind between both of those seams. However, the Bears are not actually in cover 3, or any single high coverage at all for that matter, so this play is already in a little bit of trouble. They're in cover 2, and this is one of the few times you'll ever see them in a true cover 2. They don't do it that often. But again, it's only 1st and 20. The Bears are playing it very conservatively in a 2-high shell because they don't want to give up a big chunk on first down when they already have the Rams backed up. So once more, this goes back to the overall theme of play the deep ball, take away Goff's ability to get chunk yardage, and force him to check it down. You can see how deep the linebackers are sinking here, specifically to discourage those passes to the seam. So why Goff decided to throw this seam route anyway really is beyond me, because even if he felt he could still hit that window on time, and even if he felt he was accurate enough to hit that tight of a spot in between Smith and Amos, the decision to even try it in the first place does not make sense. Why try to throw a low percentage ball like a tight seam route against cover 2 on first down when you don't really have to, when instead you've got Todd Gurley leaking out right in front of you with literally 20 yards of space to catch and run? I know we all like to make excuses for this interception, saying, oh, his foot got stepped on, the pressure affected the throw, maybe he could have hit that window if he wasn't bumped, but I don't care that he was hit. I care that he made a dumb decision that allowed the hit to affect the throw in the first place. The Bears put their stake in the ground and said, we're not going to let you throw deep for free. We would rather give Todd Gurley 20 yards of runway instead. And for some reason, that very easy check down to get a ton of yardage back and maybe salvage the drive did not sound appealing to Jared Goff. He was frustrated that Chicago wasn't letting him throw bombs. He wanted to prove to them that he could do it anyway, and he got burned. He then washed, rinsed, and repeated that same mistake for the rest of the game. On Goff's very next snap, he tried to throw a go route off play action to Brandon Cooks against cover 3 with Jackson as the deep safety, which in Eddie Jackson's own featured episode just 2 weeks ago on this channel, I explained in rather lengthy detail why that is a horrifically bad idea. But Goff decided to try it anyway and damn near threw another interception. He was very lucky that Prince Amukamara let it slip right through his hands. And on the very next play after that, he almost threw yet another interception to Amukamara, this time on a curl flat concept on 2nd and 10. And to me, this one demonstrated not just a lack of respect for the coverage, but more so just a lack of respect for the personnel he was playing against and the styles in which they play their assignments in this defense. Amukamara, for example, basically 90% of the time is going to be lined up on the line of scrimmage. It doesn't matter what the coverage call is, it can be cover 3, cover 4, or freaking blitz 0, he's going to be on that line of scrimmage playing outside leverage on the receiver so that he can get his hands on them and play them as physically as possible. That's just what he does. That's the style he's most comfortable with, and Fangio does a great job being flexible and allowing him to play that style regardless of what the actual coverage call is. But on the other side, Kyle Fuller plays those same coverages in almost the exact opposite style. He's always lined up well off the receiver, and he likes to backpedal from off coverage and keep his eyes on the quarterback and the receiver at the same time so that he can then be in a position to read and jump routes at will. That's why he gets so many interceptions. It's the style that he plays, and it enables him to bait quarterbacks into throwing lots of picks on outbreaking routes because he's just sitting there and staring at them and waiting for the ball. So you've got two corners that play two very different styles of coverage with the exact same route being run against both of them, and for some reason that I've yet to understand, Goff decides to throw the curl route against the corner who plays the style that is good against curl routes, instead of throwing it at the corner that plays a style that is not good against curl routes. If Prince Amukamara plays his style where he has his hands on the receiver through the entirety of the route and he can feel the break coming when that receiver decelerates, guess what? That curl will not be open. And if Fuller plays his style where he's always way off the receiver with no point of contact, and if he jumps outside at even the slightest nod towards the boundary, guess what? That curl will be open. Different kinds of corners are vulnerable to different kinds of routes, and Goff picked the worst possible defender to try to attack on this kind of route. McVay gave him a good play call. He gave him an option to get a 10-yard gain and a sure first down, or beyond that, just a check down for some very easy and reliable yards after the catch. But Goff wanted to prove a point that he can fit the ball wherever he wants to, rather than where the defense dictates him to, and he almost paid for it with another pick. Hell, in the next quarter he did pay for that overconfidence with another pick, his third of the night at the time, and to me that interception by Fuller might have been one of the most pointlessly dangerous throws I've seen from any quarterback the entire season. It was right after John Johnson's interception that set up the Rams on the Bears' 27-yard line, down by 9 points late in the third quarter, and that field position finally gave LA an opportunity to turn the game around as long as Goff could just steer the ship. It was 1st and 10 on a fresh drive, and once more we saw the Bears playing their own unique brand of cover 4 with Amukamara up on the line of scrimmage, and Kyle Fuller playing 7 yards off with outside leverage. And this is what pissed me off about this throw, because again it showed a lack of respect for the scouting report on Fuller's skill set and his style of play. Every single week leading up to this game, Fuller has done the exact same thing against every offense he's faced. He's played outside leverage so that he could jump outbreaking routes more easily. He's played off the line of scrimmage so that he could stare down the quarterback while he jumps those outbreaking routes. He doesn't bail. He rarely flips his hips vertically. He does one thing and one thing only, regardless of what the coverage is, and that is attack the football when it's thrown outside. So knowing all of that, as a passer that is tasked above all else with protecting the ball, you do not ever throw a deep out against Kyle Fuller when he's in cover 4. You just don't. It's basically quarterback suicide at that point because he's going to jump it no matter what. Jared Goff should have known that coming into this game, and for him to not only throw that deep out, but to stare down that route the entire time while doing it is inexcusable. It's 1st and 10 after a turnover. You're already in field goal range. If it's not there, it's not there. Just whatever you do, do not throw that route against that corner. It's basically the first rule of playing against Fangio's defense. If the throw isn't there, don't be a hero because they will punish you for it every time. I know that we can get on McVay for even calling a route concept that featured a deep out in the first place, and perhaps that's what he was referring to when he said he needed to put his quarterback in better positions, but to me, if you're a play caller and you cannot trust your quarterback to just eat the incompletion and throw it away when he's given a shaky play call, then that's a problem. It's one thing to have half of this wonder duo make a mistake, but you cannot afford to have the other half compound that mistake even more. That's how games like this one go from bad to worse. Sean McVay did not call a perfect game, that much is obvious, but he did not call a bad game either. And whether or not he wants to fall on that sword like all good coaches do in public, that's his choice. But I'm not going to quietly sit here and listen to a bunch of other people tear him to pieces for no reason. His quarterback screwed up, and he screwed up a lot. It happens. We as fans don't like when it happens, but it happens to everyone at one point or another, even if you're one of the rising stars of the NFL. It doesn't mean that Goff is a bust, and it doesn't mean that McVay's system has been exposed. It just means that both of them learned some very valuable lessons last Sunday night on how they can better help each other out. So whenever you're listening to the media talk about this matchup when it inevitably comes up again in January, just remember one thing. Sean McVay lied in his post-game press conference. He had to lie, and we love him for doing it, but it was still a lie. McVay knows how to crack this Chicago defense, and he knows he gave his players a decent number of opportunities to do it with his play calls. That's not to say it should have been an easy task, of course, but believe me, far worse quarterbacks have managed to do it before. I think if and when these two teams meet again in the playoffs, we're going to see a very different Sean McVay, and more importantly, a very different Jared Goff. I think we're going to see a less frustrated Goff, a more in-control Goff, and a Goff that is more willing to pace himself with small bites rather than choke himself to death on one big bite after another. Beating the Bears defense is a marathon, not a sprint, and that's a lesson that some quarterbacks need to learn the hard way before it can fully sink in. It may have been difficult for Rams fans to watch at the time, yes, but believe me, an educational loss like this one tends to pay off in the long run. McVay and Goff are fighters, and sometimes fighters just need to get punched in the face. It reminds them that they're human. It reminds them that they're vulnerable. But most of all, it reminds them how to get up, shake off the hit, and come back for round 2. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode, brought to you once again by our friends over at MyBookie. If you guys have been following my weekly picks videos against the spread at all, you know that I'm on a bit of a hot streak at the moment on MyBookie. I've won 6 in a row, which eventually paid for a beautiful steak dinner a couple nights ago, by the way. So I'd like to personally thank Vic Fangio for coming through for me on that one. It was really damn good. But if you yourself also maybe want to bet on a few games and make a few extra bucks on the side, you too can faithfully ride the Bears defense all the way to victory by heading to that link in the description below, entering promo code Brett on signup. That will give you an extra 50% deposit bonus on any initial deposit up to $1,000. That means you can get a whole bunch of extra betting credits to use exclusively on the site, which if you win bets with those credits, you get actual money back as if you bet with your own deposit money. So MyBookie's basically just giving you free stuff to use to potentially win even more free stuff with, so that's pretty awesome. So again, if you want to maybe put down a few bucks on games this weekend, or during the rest of the season, or during the playoffs, what have you, head to the link in the description below, enter promo code Brett, and start having some fun. As for me, I will be back next week with more film room goodness, as well as picks against the spread, of course. Subjects are TBD at the moment, but hopefully you guys like whatever I decide on in the end. Suggestions are obviously always welcome in the comments down below. You guys usually have really good ideas. So with that, hit me up with those. I will see you guys back next week with something. And until then, later.